On November 17, 1986, Japan Airlines Cargo Flight 1628, a Boeing 747 jumbo jet, encountered 3 UFOs en route from Paris to Tokyo over Alaskan airspace. 3 independent sources confirmed the sighting, in addition to the visual contact and FAA tracking systems. Let's explore. Hi everyone, and welcome to Project Bluebook, where we explore all things unidentified. I am Thor, and thanks for tuning in. This is an uncomplicated case, really, because it involves a flyby and a near miss reported by the eyewitness account of 3 professional aviators, the crew members of JAL 1628, and their account was corroborated by the Boeing 747 radar screen, the FAA tracking system, and a third independent instrument, a military radar. Yet, Captain Kenji Terauchi, co-pilot Takanori Tamifuchi, and flight engineer Yoshio Tsukuba were all subjected to ridicule and accused of unprofessional behavior. On an uneventful flight, on their second leg from Reykjavik, Iceland to Anchorage, Alaska, carrying French red wine home to Japan, at around 5 p.m. local time, they saw 2 bright lights to the left back side of the aircraft. And let's remember, for context, it was already twilight outside, even at 5 p.m. This was high Arctic territory, and it was late November, so lights in the sky would have been very visible. At 35,000 feet, flying 600 miles an hour, Captain Terauchi noticed 2 unknown aircraft flying 2,000 feet slightly below his plane. He immediately thought these were military planes, the only place in the world where then Soviet, now Russian airspace connects with US airspace, an area where planes of both countries patrol regularly in such close proximity the pilots can see each other. At this moment, Captain Terauchi realized they weren't military aircraft at all. They were much bigger, and they looked square-shaped to him, roughly the size of a Boeing 707. The 2 unknown craft kept pace with him in direction, speed, and altitude, and Terauchi additionally noted that as they kept paralleling his flight paths, their maneuver were erratic. They did stop and go and made 90 degrees turns on a dime, not behaving like normal aircraft at all. And this, of course, sounds familiar to any one of us with comparative data and eyewitness accounts of UFO sightings. Captain Terauchi contacted Alaska Flight Control, but at that time they did not see anything in the sky. This went on for 7 minutes, according to Captain Terauchi, when suddenly the 2 craft ascended to a position in front of him, shining bright lights directly at them, illuminating their cockpit and emitting notable heat. This is when Terauchi requested evasive maneuvers to deviate his flight path to avoid the unidentified crafts. He was concerned that a collision might occur and that the crafts were now maneuvering around in dangerous ways. They admitted to being frightened at that time. Alaska Flight Center now confirmed they saw a single craft right in front of them and granted the captain permission to make any evasive maneuvers necessary to avoid collision, including immediate turning to 240 due southwest.
Maintain visual contact with your traffic, and can you say the altitude of the traffic? 1620, if you can tell whether it's military or civilian.
We cannot identify the type, but we can see the strobe light.
Register, say the color of the strobe light and beacon lights.
The color is white and yellow, I think.
White and yellow. It's quite a big. I think very quite a big.
After following Alaska's flight control suggestion to make a 360 turn to see if the crafts continued their proximity position, returning to the original heading, Captain Terauchi realized a third object, much bigger than the 2 in front of him, parked further ahead. The scale was enormous, he said, and for the crew it was hard to estimate its size relative to its distance, but they guessed the size of it to be 2 to 4 times the size of an aircraft carrier. It was stationary and at close proximity. It was almost as if the two craft that parked in front of them and caused the flight path deviation were in fact warning JAL 1628 to change course to avoid collision with what Captain Terauchi later referred to as the mothership. It was dome-shaped, top and bottom, and occupied a significant part of the sky. Terauchi drew a picture of it, the shape of a giant walnut with bulges above and below and wide, flattened brim area in the middle. To him, it absolutely seemed to be stationary, where the two objects they observed kept moving. He repeatedly stated to the press, the FAA and the Japanese Civil Aviation Bureau, at the risk of his 30-year career, that the mothership was indeed an unidentified flying object in shape and behavior that defied human aviation knowledge, that it was so huge it dwarfed a Boeing jumbo jet. According to radar signature at the time and data analysis shortly after, by Japan Airlines, by Captain Terauchi himself, by the Federal Aviation Administration, and the MLIT, Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism in Japan, as well as the US Air Force, Alaska, this object's radar signature was real. It was a single signature of what Terauchi identified as the mothership, which also meant and confirmed Terauchi and his crew's observations that the two smaller craft that followed their Boeing jumbo jet around a 360-degree turn, they remained invisible to radar. This behavior is known to us, consistent with other observed accounts, including that of Robert O. Dean's account of an incident of intentional display of this very ability over Ramstein U.S. Air Force Base in Germany to show up on radar and disappear off of it. UFOs have demonstrated their ability to control radar signature as well as visual contact at will. On the ground in Anchorage, Alaska, the Federal Aviation Administration showed up to interview separately each of the crew members, Captain Terauchi, co-pilot Tamifuchi, and flight engineer Tsukuba. FAA reported they found all crew members' stories to be completely consistent, that each of the crew members was found to be normal, according to the FAA, as well as professional and rational, and that they had no drug or alcohol contents in their systems affecting their perception. This means, of course, they took physical blood samples of the crew at the time. In other words, their accounts, as persons and as professionals, were trustworthy and consistent with radar observations. A scientist with unidentified credentials, named Paul Rayburn, claimed in an interview with the New York Times that the sighting was simply an unusually bright image of the planet Jupiter and possibly Mars, and media outlets ended their story of the encounter with that statement. This is common practice to this day. It basically frames the story as an intrigue on evening news, with a natural, simple explanation concluding it wasn't a UFO, these weren't aliens, they were Jupiter and Mars, and the pilot, ridiculed in that moment, mistook them for a UFO. Philip J. Klass, an editor of Aviation Week magazine and an avid debunker of UFO stories, said that astronomical calculations put the planet Jupiter in an extremely bright position, 30 degrees above the horizon, and that it would have been visible to JAL 1628, and further, that Mars was right below it, also visible with the naked eye, which to him explained two lights in the sky. Have any of you ever seen Jupiter and Mars in the sky with your naked eye? I have. They're tiny dots of mostly contained, slightly flickering light specks. Never are they observable as large, blinding lights shining straight into your eyes, filling the cockpit, requiring you to look away. Klass skipped explaining the flight path following for a 360-degree circle, stating Captain Terauchi never mentioned this to the FAA, which is false, according to FAA records, and to Paul Stuke, a spokesperson for the FAA in Anchorage, who stated Captain Terauchi did say the objects stayed with him as he turned. This demonstrates the treacherous territory of coming forward as an eyewitness and the even greater danger of doing so in a professional capacity where you possibly risk everything, your career, profession, and livelihood, while being personally attacked, your integrity questioned, your sanity doubted, and perhaps, while piloting a Boeing 747 jumbo jet, nicknamed Heavy in aviation communication, from Paris to Alaska, suspected of somehow operating under the influence of hallucinatory narcotics, Japan Airlines spokesperson Maurice Simoncelli simply stated they had no comment, that the captain's report spoke for itself, and that required protocol of reporting was followed. In other words, Japan Airlines supported Captain Kenju Terauchi. A veteran pilot of over 30 years, he had to laugh at Philip Klass's explanation. The enormous size of the object they saw and the space it occupied in the sky would have required the planet Jupiter to be multiple the size of the Moon. Besides, the light source came from two separate craft displaying distinct white and yellow lights moving around, whereas the mothership remained a dark grayish silhouette against the twilight sky, not emitting much light at all, which logically excludes the possibility of Jupiter or Mars, as both are visible to the naked eye only as tiny light source and never a silhouette. The FAA confirmed the radar signature. The U.S. Air Force Alaska confirmed radar imagery, and so did Captain Terauchi and crew. They saw the huge craft on radar on board their aircraft as they maintained visual contact for almost 50 minutes and 400 miles of flight paths. Independently, the FAA recorded 32 minutes of the object's radar visibility. It was a benign encounter, but as to the visual contact, flight following, and confrontations, perhaps it was deliberate, intended not just to make the crew and us aware of their existence without divulging their purpose. Perhaps this time the purpose was much more direct, and the two escorting crafts accomplished their mission to avoid an air collision between Japan Airlines jumbo jet and their own giant mothership, which remained stationary in the skies above Alaska at 35,000 feet on November 17, 1986, for a purpose unidentified. You can watch and listen to this and other podcasts on Project Bluebook, where we explore all things unidentified. Each day, let's practice compassion and kindness. And please subscribe. I am Thor, and thanks for listening. See you next time.